Hey up everybody, welcome back to the Audio Cycling YouTube channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Velogames Bretagne Classic. So Bretagne Classic is about 250 kilometers long and it has about 4,000 meters of elevation, which equates to 150 miles, 12,000 feet. That's both the metrics out of the way. So Julian Alaphilippe and Tadej Pogačar are the most expensive. I think you're going to be seeing a lot of people putting both of these riders on. I think that's probably the safest and most sensible option because Alaphilippe is clearly looking to build towards the World Championships and he did okay. I can't remember what the race is called, but it was the one that Evenepoel won. And Pogačar, of course, is just Pogačar. He literally just does really well in every single race that he does. Stuyven at 22 I think is pretty good considering that he will definitely be able to get over the hilly terrain. It's very up and down, nothing crazy, it's just very little flat in the whole day, but Stuyven is very good at that kind of stuff. He is just coming off an altitude camp. He hasn't raced since the Tour, which means that his form is very much unknown, which is a bit of a trend throughout a lot of these riders, that many people are coming off of the Olympics or the Tour and nobody really knows where people are at the moment. But that's okay because that means that at least everybody's in the same ballpark. The 20 pointers, there's a few which I quite like. I think Nizzolo and Ulissi are my favourites. I'd be avoiding Ballerini, Barguil. Kuznetsov is actually okay, but he just hasn't been fantastic throughout this whole season, so I'm not overly keen on it. Dan Martin's a decent option. Again, another one who hasn't raced since the Olympics, but I think that Nizzolo and Ulissi are my favourites from the 20s, just because Ulissi did okay at the Tour of Poland, and Nizzolo, he won the European champs around Plouay last year, which is pretty much where this race is. He's done races of this kind of distance before. If you remember back earlier this year, he did well at Ghent-Wevelgem, which is a long race, and also in Milan-San Remo last year. So I think Nizzolo and Ulissi are my favourites. Van der Lam is decent, considering that Kuznetsov might not be on the greatest of form, but I'd probably be favouring some 16 pointers instead. I like David Decker just because if you remember back to stage 5 of the Tour of Poland, that was a very hilly day and he surprised himself by finishing 7th, but he was very boxed in against the barriers, so he actually could have come much higher than that. That was a very hilly day and I think that he's probably the main man for Jumbo-Visma. Other 16 pointers, David Gaudu, another one who hasn't raced since Tokyo, but a race that suits him, very up and down. And he's actually fairly fast in a little reduced sprint, as we saw in Liège-Bastogne-Liège earlier this year. His teammate Valentin Madouas might not be, I probably wouldn't favour him as much. Ben Herman's probably not. Conrad, difficult to say. Bora have quite a few options. I'm not sure if Conrad will be the main one. Pierre Latour, always a difficult one to judge. Same with Turgis, although he did very well at the Spring Classics earlier this year. And Michael Valgren, who I have a sneaking suspicion might do quite well. He's come 4th and 2nd in the last 2 editions of this race. Usually he does quite well around the World Championships. That seems to always be his main goal. So I wouldn't be surprised if Valgren pulls out a really good performance. 16 pointers, probably my favourite ones. Decker, Valgren and Gaudu, I'd probably say are the best ones there. 14 pointers, Dion Smith, I'd say as a puncher, definitely the most dangerous guy that Bike Exchange have in this race. 12 pointers, I will just jump to the main man, Mikel Froy-Canore. He's in fantastic form at the moment and I think that he's somebody who you almost have to put on your team as a 12 pointer. That's a really good value pick. So Mikel Froy-Canore, I'd almost say, is one of the first people who you should put on your team. If you need another 12 pointer, I'd probably say that Catania or Hofstetter are your second picks for that. 10 pointers, Ethan Hayter, after coming off the win at the Tour of Norway, looked really good shape, and I think that Ineos will be working for him. The only question is, how does he do over about 250 kilometres? Just because he's never really done a race of that distance before, but I have to include him because otherwise the Quick Link podcast will literally hunt me down and kill me. 8 pointers, I don't like any of them, to be honest with you. I'd much rather you skip down to the 6 pointers because there are a few here which I quite like. The first one is Gamay for Intermarché. We saw him do a very good ride at the Tour of Poland recently and also in that race which Evenepoel won the other day, which the name still eludes me, but he's a pretty fast in a sprint. And we've seen the likes of Jakobsen do well in this race a few years ago when he was 21. Gamay, I think that he has the capabilities of finishing quite high up in this race, but it would probably have to rely on like a bunch sprint perhaps to really get a very high result. Other than that, Quentin Hermans is another one from his team who could provide an attacking option, and there are some other ones which I quite like. It's Edith Skelling. I especially like because of how he looked at the Tour of Norway, a second to Hayter. He's done well in one-day races early this year. A really good puncher, and I think you'll see him on the attack more than likely. This could be a very big breakout performance for Edith Skelling in a very big and prestigious one-day race. Other than that, you could say Vingegaard, but he didn't look great recently at the Tour of Norway, which makes me think that he's got other goals, and his form probably isn't going to turn around just for one-day race, of which he's not very renowned for doing well in one-day races anyway. So I'd probably say that Skelling and Girmay are your better ones to pick. 4 pointers, everybody knows about Juan Ayuso, the 18-year-old for UAE Team Emirates. He did crash at the Tour de l'Avenir recently, so it depends on how he's going to recover from that. But he will, I'd say he's more than likely going to be on a domestique supporting role for Pogacar and Ulissi. I'm basically saying I'm not sure about him winning this race, but a top 20 is very possible, and also picking up assist points for Ulissi or Pogacar. A really good pick would be Ayuso, and I'd expect a lot of people to be picking him because, well, he's just he's got quite a lot of hype around him at the moment. Other than that, other 4 pointers, Matthias Skelmos Jensen has looked good recently at the Tour of Denmark. I think he did okay in GC there, so that could be quite an outside pick, but again, will he just be working for Stuyven? That's very possible. And also at the top, who I completely missed, at the top of the 4 pointers, would be Giovanni Aliotti for Bora. He's one of our multiple options. It'll be Conrad, Skelling, or Aliotti. Aliotti did look good at the Tour of Poland, so that could be another 4-pointer option. So those are all the people. In terms of who I actually think, this is a bit of a team that I've got going on here. I do quite like Valgren. Currently my big dilemma is whether I pick a 20-pointer like Nizzolo or Ulissi, and then pick 2 4-pointers like Ayuso and Aliotti, or do I pick a 16-pointer like Valgren and Decker, and then use those points to upgrade the 4-pointers up to 6-pointers like Skelling and Girmay. Alaphilippe, Pogacar and Honore for me are just locked into the team. They are probably some of the favourites for this race, especially considering that this gives me De Koenig's first and second choices. They're going to be making this a very attacking race, and I think that Honore and Alaphilippe provide me with both of those options. The advantage of doing the same with the UAE riders is that they probably have the second strongest team, which means that these guys will be animating the race, and you basically have all the main favourites up on your team, and then you pick 2 4-pointers to round out your team. Stuyven I do quite like, but again, quite unknown coming off of the training camp. I think he's more than likely building towards Worlds and Roubaix, so therefore it's very unknown how he'll do here. But I think that's about it really. Those are all the riders that I like, and some of the ones that I do not like for the upcoming Bretagne Classic, GP Plouay, whatever you want to call it. Let me know who you're going to pick down in the comments below. If you have any questions or if you want any advice on any of the teams that you're thinking of picking, then put them in the comments or put them onto Twitter at Paddy Blake with an extra E. And all that's left to say is to keep your mask on, stay safe, and I'll talk to you at the Benelux Tour. Salut!